Adrian Langley was once hailed as a prodigy. Ever since he was 10 years old, his small fingers conquered classical concertos. He had been singled out as a musical genius. Even at that young age, his capacity to bring depth and gravity to each note astounded world-class teachers and critics alike. The piano, with its rows of black and white keys, felt more like home to him than any physical place. It offered him solace after an argument with his parents, excitement during carefree childhood afternoons, and later in life, the illusion of stability amid the storms of adulthood. As a boy, he would disappear into a practice room in the local music conservatory and reemerge hours later, cheeks flushed, eyes bright, with the compositions of Chopin or Rachmaninoff pulsing through his veins. By the time Adrian reached his 20s, he was traveling across continents for competition. He performed with orchestras in grand halls where gilded balconies and velvet seats seemed to stretch into the horizon. With every flawless performance, expectations soared. Soon, his schedule was packed from dawn to dusk. Private tutors, master classes, performances, interviews, so much attention and responsibility. No matter how well he managed it, inevitably began to erode his original sense of wonder. Each show became a rigorous demonstration of technical prowess rather than an act of communion with the music that had once nurtured his spirit. Gradually, possibility transformed into obligation. Adrian's days were scheduled down to the minute. There was no space to pause, to breathe, to improvise a silly melody on a random old upright in a dusty corner. Always there was a need to be perfect. He learned to associate the piano with pressure. He had to be the best. His artistry became entangled with performance anxiety, and with each star-studded concert, a fraction of his joy in creating music slipped away. At some point, he forgot that music could be playful, unexpected, delicate. He found himself watching the clock anxiously as he practiced each day, even though the piano's once familiar comfort seemed to slip from his fingers like ghosts. Things worsened when he hit a particularly rough setback, a string of subpar performances that were insufficiently rehearsed, fueled by his creeping exhaustion and staleness. His critics, once waxing poetic about the depth of his interpretations, now sniffed that he was mechanical. The magazines published articles about him losing his spark. Sponsors quietly dropped him. Where once his phone buzzed with invitations to recitals, now it lay silent on polished surfaces of dressing room tables. The silences in his life grew wider. He felt them press in on him during the nights when only the dim city lights kept him company. Although he continued to perform, his heart had long since left the stage. One wintry afternoon, after an uninspired rehearsal, Adrian pushed open the heavy glass doors of the Performing Arts Center and stepped onto a crowded downtown sidewalk. Fall winds were giving way to early flakes of snow, swirling in the city's neon-lit canyons. And the day's rehearsal, intended to be a final run-through for a small benefit concert next week, had been exhausting. His colleagues noticed his mechanical playing and forced, hollow expressions. The head conductor, a friend of Adrian's, delicately suggested that he take a break afterward. Sitting on the stoop of the building, Adrian could still hear those words echoing in his mind. He wondered if a short rest would fix everything. Perhaps deep down, he feared that a break might extend forever, that he'd never truly reclaim what he once felt. He set off down the sidewalk, shoulders hunched. His quick pace reflected his desire to outrun the bleak thoughts swirling in his head. After only a few steps, something made him pause. It was a melody, floating gently on the crisp, icy wind. Not classical, not pop. Some whimsical jazzy tune danced through the air, accompanied by the soft hum of passers-by living their own bustling lives. He glanced around and spotted a man playing a portable keyboard on the sidewalk, just a little way off from the main flow of foot traffic. He was a flamboyant figure, bright red suspenders over a checkered shirt, a battered fedora that had seen better days, and a grin that would not quit. He played with a joyful abandon, swaying from side to side, his battered sneakers tapping against the pavement. Something about the raw, honest energy of this street performer was irresistible. He looped through chords in a lazy swing tempo, letting occasional mistakes pass like optional embellishments, untroubled by the idea of perfection. Adrian could scarcely remember the last time he had heard someone play with so little concern for technique or identity, or who was listening. It was as though the piano were merely a tool for the performer's boundless joy. People often describe moments of serendipity, tiny crossroads in life where a person with struggling hopes stumbles upon a scene. For Adrian, that was precisely this moment. He found himself slowing down. Something unexpected drew him closer. The crowd around the street performer wasn't large, but those present were clapping, tapping feet, and occasionally dropping spare change into a battered guitar case lying open on the ground. A mother gently danced with her toddler daughter. A pair of teenagers clapped in sync with the improvised beats. Nearby, a man in a business suit nodded with a half smile as though, for a second, he too had escaped from the chains of daily monotony. The performer broke off into a lively flourish, then ended in a bright, ascending scale. The small gathering applauded cheerfully. The busker, noticing Adrian lurking near the edge, lifted his gaze from the keyboard. The grin he offered was friendly, almost conspiratorial. He bowed with theatrical flair, and the audience erupted in a final, enthusiastic cheer before some moved on. But the busker turned to Adrian, tipping his worn fedora in a gesture of invitation. Adrian hesitated. He felt a flutter of nerves, or perhaps excitement, stirring in his stomach. "Hey, friend," said the man. He had a spirited tenor voice, the kind that might break into a spontaneous tune. "You look like you might be a fellow musician. Care to jam with me?" Adrian took an unconscious step backward. The busker had read him so accurately it stung a bit. "I'm not sure," Adrian murmured. "I'm just passing by." "Suit yourself," the man replied amiably. He pressed a chord progression on the small keyboard and grinned. "But if you change your mind, I'm here to share tunes, not hog the stage. The name's Sam." Adrian nodded, uncertain how this conversation had begun, but oddly reluctant to end it. He told himself he should just decline politely and leave. He had 100 more pressing things to do, but something in Sam's eyes told him there was no performance to stress over here, no newspapers, no critics, just a small corner of the world where music was music and joy was joy. So Adrian lingered for another moment. Sam noticed. "Come on, man," he said in a playful tone. "Next tune, you'll join me. We'll just make something up. Sound good?" Adrian swallowed the immediate impulse to say no. His life for so many years had been governed by a punishing schedule. Now, for once, he was free, at least for this afternoon. No one was waiting for him. No manager was standing by with a countdown until rehearsal. He had 2 hours to kill before going home to his empty apartment. With a small sigh that was half acceptance, half trepidation, he said, "All right, sure." Sam shot him a brilliant smile. "Fantastic. Here." He scooted over on the bench. The battered keyboard had just enough room for 2 sets of hands if they angled themselves carefully. Adrian tentatively placed his fingers on the keys. They were unweighted, a far cry from the grand pianos he was used to, but he felt a familiar electric tingle. "Play something with me," Sam coaxed. "Don't hesitate, we're just having fun." Adrian inhaled. He thought of Chopin, of Rachmaninoff, of Beethoven, and all the formal pieces he had spent decades mastering. But those were not the right tunes for this moment. So he closed his eyes and started plucking out a simple blues progression. Sam took up the same theme, adding syncopation and light-hearted riffs. Together they found a groove. It was not graceful, not polished, but it was alive, and more than that, it was free. Adrian began to smile in spite of himself, and he loosened his shoulders, allowing the chord progressions to roll easily beneath his fingertips. A small audience gathered around them again, glimpses of surprise flickering across their faces at the unassuming man in a black wool coat joining forces with a flamboyant busker in red suspenders. The crowd offered some claps, some cheers. Adrian felt, for the first time in ages, unburdened by the constraints of expectation. One chord bled joyously into another. When they finished, the applause that erupted felt intimate and benevolent. Sam slapped him on the back affectionately. Adrian's cheeks were burning with a mixture of embarrassment and an awakened sense of excitement. That was amazing, man, Sam said, his voice warm. We should do it again sometime. And Adrian, stunned at the words leaving his mouth, replied, I'd like that. After that spontaneous sidewalk duet, Adrian kept thinking of Sam's carefree grin. He found himself recalling the moment each time he sank into the cramped darkness of a practice room. The memory tugged at him during the following week's benefit concert, which he performed with lukewarm success. Even though the audience politely applauded, he felt little sense of accomplishment. On the drive home that night, the lights of the city outside his window reminded him of that bright, spinning day with Sam. Each red or green neon sign above the shops flashed images of an alternate reality where music was not burdened by striving for flawlessness. He wondered if that reality could be his again, or if it was just a dream. A few days later, after finishing an errand downtown, Adrian found himself wandering to the same corner where he had this time. The weather was a bit kinder, the last of fall's persistent sunshine glinting on window panes. The crisp air carried the faint smell of roasted coffee coming from a nearby cafe. Adrian was not sure if Sam would even be there. Street performers often roamed from one location to another, not beholden to any schedule. Yet as he turned the corner, he recognized the brilliant flash of red suspenders. Sam was stationed in front of a shuttered storefront, playing a lively tune for a small, appreciative crowd. Sam spotted him at once. The performer's face lit up as he waved. Adrian felt a wave of unexpected relief wash over him. Someone was actually happy to see him, with no ulterior motive. Feeling a pride he hadn't felt in a long while, Adrian walked up. He slipped discreetly into the group of onlookers, watching Sam's adept keyboard improvisations and listening to the effortless scatting he performed from time to time. When Sam finished, Adrian stepped forward and said, "Hello again." "Adrian, my man," Sam cried out, standing up and giving him a playful half-hug, half-handshake. "If you're around for a bit, I'd love to jam. I grabbed a spare stool from a friend so we don't have to sit elbow to elbow this time." Adrian felt the corners of his mouth tug upward despite himself. "I've got some time," he admitted. "Sure, let's have a go." Within minutes, they were playing together once more. Adrian felt his initial awkwardness slip away under Sam's easy rhythm. The synergy between them felt strangely natural. When a note didn't land quite right, Sam would just laugh and incorporate it into the next phrase, turning it into a new motif. Adrian, who had been chastised for the tiniest slip in pitch or tempo since childhood, found it oddly thrilling to accept imperfection as part of the ride. Even the crowd, though mostly strangers, seemed to appreciate the rawness and spontaneity. They played for nearly an hour. Sam occasionally broke the music to swap jokes with the crowd, while Adrian, more reserved, quietly explored chord progressions he had never tried in any performance. After the final tune, when Sam took off his fedora and gestured for any parting tips from the folks, Adrian was surprised to see more than a few bills left in the open guitar case. He had forgotten that street performing was also a livelihood for people like Sam. Sam gathered the tips gracefully, offering thanks to each donor. Then he turned to Adrian, his eyes shining. "Look at you," he remarked. "You seem happier than when I first last saw you." Adrian didn't deny it. "I do feel lighter," he admitted. "Thank you, Sam. I never realized this could be so refreshing." Sam nodded knowingly. "Music is an expression of the soul, you know. Sometimes we get so stuck in our heads that we forget it's supposed to be fun, too." They exchanged numbers, a simple text-based arrangement in case Adrian wanted to meet up again. Although Adrian's life had mostly revolved around concerts in formal settings, something within him recognized that Sam was extending a genuine offer of friendship and unburdened creativity. Over the following weeks, Adrian found reasons to drop by that same street corner when his formal rehearsals ended. Sometimes they played for hours until the city lights came on and the sidewalks emptied. Other times, they just chatted, sipping hot coffee and rummaging through Sam's small repertoire of comedic impressions. Through these encounters, Adrian discovered that Sam's love for music ran deep, fueled not by personal ambition or formal training, but by a desire to connect with other people's hearts. For Sam, each jam session was a conversation, a chance to share a feeling rather than prove a point. Slowly, Adrian noticed changes within himself. Even though he still gave recitals in small auditoriums, he realized he was less tense about them. Occasionally during practice, he closed his eyes and remembered the freedom of those unpolished chords with Sam. He began to wonder how classical music could be reimagined with a bit of Sam's freewheeling spirit, how it might bring joy back into the performance. He experimented with playing some preludes and nocturnes in a more playful manner during his personal practice, letting the melody stretch and rise at unexpected moments or sprinkling in playful grace notes for the sole reason that it felt good. He discovered, to his surprise, that it didn't destroy the compositions. Instead, it brought them to life in surprising ways. One late afternoon in early December, when the city was awash with holiday lights, Sam invited Adrian to meet him on a particularly busy corner near the annual Christmas market. Bustling clusters of people carried shopping bags stuffed with gifts. Street lamps were strung with twinkling colored bulbs, bathing the sidewalk in gentle rainbow hues. Adrian arrived wearing a thick coat and a new scarf that his mother had sent him for the season. He found Sam setting up his portable keyboard stand by a giant artificial Christmas tree. A golden star at the top swayed in the chilly breeze, producing soft metallic jingles. "Hey, partner," Sam called out joyously. "Hope you're ready. We could have a bigger crowd tonight, so let's make it an event." Adrian gave a firm nod, though he felt a thrill of nerves, far different from the paralyzing kind that had haunted him at formal competitions. This was more akin to excitement. They started with a soulful ballad, Sam singing softly about the hush and warmth of the holiday spirit, his voice weaving through the crowd's chatter. People slowed their steps, drawn by the gentle lull of the music. Children pointed excitedly, some swaying in place. Tourists grinned, quickly snapping photos on their phones. Then Sam leaned over to Adrian between verses and whispered, "Let's do something classical with a bit of spice." Adrian, heart-pounding, obliged. He struck up a simplified version of Silent Night, infusing it with gentle chords that soared into airy harmonies. Sam layered it with a hushed, whispered version of the melody, half sung and half played. The notes drifted on the air like snowflakes, unique, delicate, and fleeting. The crowd hushed noticeably, lulled by the ethereal quality of the arrangement. In that moment, Adrian felt a surge of connectedness, as if the fears, doubts, and wounds inside him dissolved into the chord progression. He was no longer playing to prove himself, he was playing to share beauty. When they finished, a wave of quiet wonder washed over the spectators. Then applause rose, hee-haw, hearty, appreciative, warm. A child, no older than 6, shouted, "That was so pretty!" while clapping her mittened hands together. Adrian looked at Sam, who winked at him with a grin of encouragement. Then Adrian let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He felt a melting of the icy barrier he'd built inside himself all these years, a thaw that let old passion seep back in. Over the following weeks, Adrian discovered that he craved opportunities to play with Sam. It was not just performance, it was a kind of therapy for his spirit. His recitals, meanwhile, began to reflect this new perspective. Audiences noticed a soulful lilt in his interpretations that had been absent for a long time. The head conductor, after one of Adrian's engagements, shook his hand and said, "I don't know what's changed, but I see the old spark in your eyes, Adrian. Keep it up." High praise, indeed, from someone who had previously recommended that Adrian take a break. A day came when Sam texted, "Meet me at the corner of Maple and 10th at 3 p.m. Adrian hastily rearranged a small meeting so he could be there. However, upon arrival, he did not see the usual battered fedora or the portable keyboard. He was about to leave, thinking perhaps he'd gotten the time wrong, when he spotted Sam waving from across the street. Standing beside him was another man, tall, with a ponytail and a guitar case slung over his shoulder. Next to him stood a woman, perhaps in her 50s, cradling a violin. She had an air of quiet grace. "Adrian, meet my friends," Sam declared, clapping the guitarist and violinist on the shoulders. "This is Julio and this is Martha. We've got ourselves a little ensemble. We thought we'd have a jam session together and see what happens." Adrian was taken aback but intrigued. He introduced himself. Martha smiled warmly, while Julio returned a steady handshake. Sam unveiled his portable keyboard, carefully propping it on a stand near a bus shelter. They began testing out a few chords and licks before launching into a gentle, jazzy fusion piece. Julio's guitar gave a smooth, melodic lead. Martha's violin soared effortlessly in counterpoint. Sam offered samples of scattered vocals and some chord comping, and Adrian grounded it all with improvisational flourishes on the keys. It was messy at times. Someone would forget a chord progression or a note might squeak, but the sense of camaraderie wrapped them in a bubble of collective joy. Pedestrians stopped and stared, some snapped photos. The boisterous applause at the end felt like a group hug. They played an entire set of 5 tunes that afternoon, forging a kind of ephemeral sidewalk symphony. Even the city's ambient noises, cars honking, dogs barking, seemed to merge into the mix now and then, accenting the performance as though the entire street were part of their band. When they ended, the 4 of them found themselves flush with the triumph of creation. Martha's eyes glistened with tears of happiness. Julio was euphoric, shouting, "We have to keep doing this!" Adrian felt goosebumps on his arms. In classical performance, he had known admiration, even fame, but rarely such a sense of being intimately woven into a fabric of companionship. They were amateurs, professionals, buskers, and everything in between, forging a musical tapestry that was both earthy and transcendent. He realized with a stab of heartfelt clarity that this was what had been missing in his life. Not the skill, not the applause, but the feeling that music was a living energy meant to be savored and shared. Had he known this kind of collaboration and humility while he was skyrocketing as a child prodigy, he might never have lost his joy. As the winter months wore on, Adrian's collaborations with Sam and the newly formed ensemble became a regular occurrence. They sought out corners with the best acoustics or the friendliest foot traffic. Sometimes they treated onlookers to blues, sometimes to classically influenced holiday tunes, and now and again, Adrian would break into a snippet of a piano concerto. The comedic effect of hearing a few bars of Tchaikovsky or Beethoven drifting through the open air, only to be transformed into a jazz jam, was a delight to passers-by. A spontaneous dance crew once joined them, turning the sidewalk into an all-out block party. It was an unexpected spectacle that soared on nothing but pure collaborative joy. From these experiences, Adrian began to reapproach his professional life. He accepted a new round of private performances, but this time, he insisted on having creative input on the repertoire. Instead of limiting himself to only the canonical pieces from the old masters, he spiced them up with minor improvisations, transitions, or unexpected turns. Critics initially were perplexed, but they soon began praising his renewed artistry. They noted a heartfelt approach in his playing that had been missing for years. Teachers marveled at the synergy between technique and expression he now exhibited. More importantly, Adrian felt alive on stage, unafraid to show the vulnerability of his rawness, trusting that a stumble could become the kernel of new inspiration. In between these performances, he never forgot the sidewalks where his real awakening began. He carved out pockets of time to meet Sam, Julio, and Martha. Sometimes it was just Sam and Adrian, like in the early days, playing silly duets that made them laugh. During these sessions, Adrian discovered a facet of music that transcended mastery. He found acceptance in imperfection and the beautiful chaos of shared spontaneity. Soon he realized that the buskers, the working professionals, the novices, and even the passers-by were all part of the same living organism called music. Every note they played connected them in an invisible bond. By the time spring arrived, the city began to thaw and the atmosphere lightened. The streets, no longer shackled by snow, buzzed with fresh life. Color seemed brighter and the air felt cleaner. Adrian, on a bright morning, sat at his baby grand piano in his living room, gazing out the window at the budding trees. He remembered how he once dreaded practicing alone. Now, an idea bubbled inside him. He sent Sam a text. "What if we do a free outdoor concert? Gather more musicians, string some lights, see who shows up." Sam responded swiftly, brimming with enthusiasm. "Yes, let's make it happen." In the weeks that followed, they organized a small event. They chose a well-trafficked pedestrian plaza near the river, where local artisans sold handmade crafts from tables beneath large umbrellas. Sam rallied more busker friends, a flutist, a percussionist with a cajon drum, and a soulful singer who sometimes performed on the city's subway lines. Adrian tapped into a few connections from the classical world, persuading a cellist and a clarinetist to join, his pooled resources to rent a small portable stage and a decent sound system. Word spread among the local community that a sidewalk symphony would be happening free for anyone to attend, or better yet, to join in if they wished. On the day of the concert, the plaza bustled with activity. Bright sunshine streamed across the pavement, children ran about chasing one another, parents browsed crafts, and dogs wagged their tails in excitement. Sam wore his customary red suspenders, but he'd updated his battered fedora with a colorful scarf wrapped around it. Adrian, for once, did not feel the crippling tension of performance. He wore a casual button-down shirt and a radiant grin. He was present in this moment, body and soul. The first notes rang out, an upbeat melody that combined rhythmic strums of guitar with a playful flute line, underpinned by the cajon's driving pulse. The clarinet wove around, adding a sweet melodic dimension. Adrian joined in, his fingers dancing across the portable keyboard. Martha's violin soared above it all, and the cellist provided a harmonious anchor. Sam lent his voice here and there, scatting nonsense syllables that somehow felt perfect. As the music swelled, passers-by stopped to watch. Some shyly inched closer, others openly danced. The joy was almost palpable in the spring air. For a full hour, they performed pieces that traversed genres, from classical-inspired preludes to earthy funk grooves, from gentle ballads to blazing improvised runs reminiscent of big band jazz. At times, Adrian lost himself in the swirl of sound, letting his fingers speak in ways his voice never could. Each instrument took a turn shining in the improvisational spotlight, weaving sincerity and whimsy into the tapestry. The city's background hum, the distant honk of taxis crossing a nearby bridge, the chatter of people ordering snacks at food trucks, played like an accompaniment that recognized no boundaries between stage and street. When the music finally reached a natural conclusion, the applause that erupted was no mere courtesy. It was a shared breath, an outpouring of gratitude for the unexpected gift. Adrian looked out over the crowd. Some were cheering, a few had tears running down their cheeks. Many were capturing the moment on their phones. A father, holding his small child on his shoulders, gave Adrian a thumbs up, gesturing with his free hand to encourage more. All the faces beaming in the sunlight were reminders to Adrian of why he had started playing music in the first place. They launched into an encore, a gentle, reflective piece that Sam and Adrian had developed together on the sidewalk months ago. A calm, graceful lullaby that invited everyone to cherish the moment. Near the end, the ensemble fell silent except for Adrian's soft piano lines floating on the breeze. He played with his eyes closed, letting memories swirl, the constant pressure, the disappointment, the heartbreak, the monotony, and then the redemption he'd found when a man in red suspenders offered to share a plastic keyboard on a cold city corner. Tears pricked at Adrian's eyelids, but not out of grief. It felt like a quiet final release of everything that had once weighed him down. At last, the piece resolved with a tender chord, and for a moment the plaza seemed hushed, as if cherishing an afterglow. When the applause rose again, Adrian opened his eyes. Sam stood next to him, gently touching his shoulder. "We did it," he whispered. Adrian looked at the bright, smiling faces of the crowd and felt nothing but gratitude. In the days that followed, people talked about that sidewalk concert. They shared photos and videos online. Some wrote thoughtful notes about how the music had made them feel less alone in their struggles, how it had reminded them that beauty can flourish in the most stressful corners of life. Adrian received messages from strangers saying they'd felt hope listening to him play. He had always believed the role of a performer was to share music's power, but only now did he realize what a profound impact genuine, joy-driven playing could have. It was not about the achievement, but about forging connections, braiding hearts together for a few fleeting moments, and leaving everyone richer for it. And so Adrian Langley, who once stood in austere concert halls playing elaborate concertos while feeling numb inside, found a fresh path. He neither abandoned the classical world nor fully embraced the carefree life of a street performer. Instead, he forged his own synergy, a merging of discipline and freedom, technique and exuberance. He continued to appear in sit down recitals, but he also made time for random jams on the street, playing a battered keyboard under city lights. He wrote new compositions blending cinematic classical flair with street inspired rhythms. He recorded these with Sam, Julio, Martha, and other newfound friends, labeling the folder on his computer Sidewalk Symphonies. Whenever Adrian remembered the day he had first paused to watch Sam in those red suspenders, he smiled and felt a soothing ripple of gratitude. From that once bleak moment where he had hovered on the brink of quitting music altogether, a seed of hope had been planted in him. That seed flourished each time he remembered that music is at its core a gift, sometimes meticulously practiced, sometimes wildly improvised, but always a means of sharing the inexpressible. If he closed his eyes, he could still hear the echo of the sidewalk jam, the sweet, imperfect swirl of notes dancing on a cold wind. They were reminders that imperfection was nothing to fear. It was, in fact, the crack that let the light pour through. He had found joy again in the last place he had thought to look, in the chaos and clutter of a busy city block, with a man wearing a grin as wide as the horizon, dressed in red suspenders. Adrian vowed he would never again let the wonder slip from his fingers, because once rediscovered, that pure love for music was something to cherish, like a treasured chord that rings on long after the notes are struck, softly shimmering in the heart,